Hi, everyone. I'm Scott Branley.
And I'm Alicia Coakley. Every member of the church has a story to share, one that can instill faith, invite growth, and inspire others.
On today's episode, we're going to hear how a final goodbye led one woman to lean on the atonement for healing. Welcome to Latter-day Lights. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Latter-day Lights. We're so glad you're here with us today, and we're really excited to introduce to you our guest, Meredith Wahlquist. Meredith, how are you doing today?
Good. Thank you for having me on.
Well, thanks for reaching out to us. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So I've been asking everybody who reaches out to us lately, how did you come across Latter-day Lights?
I found you on Spotify. It's something that I listen to on my way to work. So,
oh, perfect. Just randomly popped up, huh?
Yes, I was looking for stories, LDS stories, and I saw. It's like, oh, here's one I'd never seen. I was very excited.
Oh, good.
Awesome.
Now you've listened to a couple of them. Do you have a favorite guest? Do you have someone that really stood out to you that you loved?
They were all really good. I'm trying to think. I think I already have heard a couple of times some of your guests, but I think Dusty Smith's always really a fun one. So
he is super fun. Yep.
Yeah.
So for those of you that don't know, Dusty Smith, he actually fell away from the church, and then he actually went against the church for 26 years, and then he came back. And his story is pretty cool. So go check that out if you have a minute. After you watch Meredith's episode, of
After
course.
Meredith, that's right. Well, Meredith, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Okay, so I am a mom of 4 kids. I'm married, and let's see, I'm a special education teacher for students. I work at a place where we for a day treatment program for kids with mental health challenges. And let's see, what else? What do I like to do for fun? I've always loved to dance. I love reading. I love talking. And
so does Alicia.
What?
So those are some of the things that I like to do.
Awesome. I have to ask, so do you love dancing and you're good at it, or are you more like, I'm gonna really age myself here, like Elaine from Seinfeld? You remember? That's me.
I danced for a long time when I was younger. I wouldn't say I'm that good still, but I love Just Dance. That's my only.
But you got rhythm.
I play.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
That's a fun game. Yeah, we'll play that as a family.
Yeah,
that's the only time I'm like, oh no, I'm like, oh man, I have to win. So I do want to.
That's funny. We've played it a few times, and whenever John plays it, my husband, he's such a cheater, right? But he cheats in a way that, you can't even be mad at him, because he knows he doesn't have rhythm. When we first when we were practicing our dance for when we were going to get married, right? Like our first couples dance or whatever, I made the comment that he, looked like Frankenstein, because he's just just big and just he doesn't have any movement. And so with Just Dance, he stands there and he just watches wherever the controller's supposed to hit, and he'll just go boop, boop, boop. And he wins every round. I'm like, that's not the point of the game.
I would be so mad.
I'm like, that's not how you do it. And we're all working up a sweat, and he's just boom, boom. We're like, no.
That's called strategy.
It is strategy. I know you can't really be mad at him, but at the same time, you're like, just dance, right? Literally the name of the game.
Yeah. Well, fun.
Too funny. Yeah.
So Meredith, the time is yours to share your story. Why don't you go ahead?
Okay. So my story starts in, we're going to say, in 1998.
Okay.
I had moved. I was living in Boston, and I'd come home from being a nanny there. And I had a friend who was going to he was going to church he lived up Big Cottonwood Canyon in Salt Lake. And he was going to a branch that was up there by the ski resort by Brighton. And I could go to a singles ward down by my house, but I thought, I kind of want to go up there. It's pretty fun. So I started going to church up there. And after a while, my branch president said, I feel prompted that you need to go to a singles ward in our stake. I know you're not in our stake, but I've talked to this singles ward bishop, and I'd like you to come go to that. So I started going there, and I met my friend Madeline. She was a lot of fun, and I would go to her house a lot. She was living at home with her parents, and got to know this family. And a few months later, on Easter weekend, her brother Nate came home, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, he is so cute." So he was in school in Arizona at a tech school for heating and air conditioning. And the next month in May, he came back and we started dating. And in July, we were already engaged, and we were married at the end of September in 1999.
Wow.
So it was kind of a whirlwind romance, I guess, but we were happy. And so then, let's see, in 2002, we had my daughter, Katie. And then 3 years later, in March of 2005, we had my son, Cameron. And I was a stay-at-home mom. Nate he went back to school to be a nurse. And so he did heating and air, and he was a nurse. And things were just going along like that pretty well. In 2014, I felt really prompted that I needed to get back into my field. I graduated with a degree in sociology and kind of did social work. I used to be a probation officer before my daughter was born. I wanted to go back and become a social worker, a therapist. But I felt like I needed to get back into what I was doing. And so I got a job as a case manager working with moms who had needs and needed help with resources for their kids, and started doing that. I did that for a couple of years, and in 2016, it was getting pretty hard. I hadn't worked full time, and then I went down my hours, and then I was just working in 2016, just kind of part-time, and they had me teaching drug prevention classes out of school. And years before, when my daughter, I think, was in second grade, I had considered being a school teacher, but I thought, I don't know if I want to be that. That sounds kind of terrible. But I thought about it for the hours and things with my kids. So I thought, you know what? Maybe I'll be an aide in the school next year. I don't want to keep doing this job that I'm doing. Or I'll be a substitute. So I went to a substitute training and found out you can be a teacher, it's called an ARL, which is alternative route to licensure, where you can start teaching and be doing your classes at the same time. And so I thought, you know what, maybe I should do that. So I talked to my brother, who's a teacher, and he said, you know what, you should do special education, because all you'll have to do is take your teaching classes because you already have a degree. And I thought, maybe I will do that. So I was really considering it, but hadn't decided yet. And this was probably maybe in March and April that I was thinking about this. And so in April, sorry, let me go back. In April, my husband started having this really bad shoulder pain. And now something to know about him is that he was very active. He was a rock climber. He worked as a nurse. He did heating and air conditioning in his own business along with his nursing. So, he could have hurt his shoulders, kind of what we were thinking. So he was going to the chiropractor. He was getting massages, and it was just getting worse and worse. And I kind of noticed that he looked like he might be losing a little bit of weight. And he was already, our whole marriage, he was like 150 pounds, like 5'10", 150, never gained a pound, which was amazing. He was like,
Yeah.
um, and, uh, and so I noticed that he kind of looked like he'd lost 10 pounds, and he looked a little bit like he might be a little kind of yellow, honestly. But I thought, oh, you know what? I'm sure he's just heard it. And he was diagnosing himself with, I think I might have diverticulitis because my stomach kind of hurts. And he's a nurse. And so he's just figuring out what he thinks it could be. And so that just kind of goes along, and it gets kind of worse. And by the end of May, it's getting worse. And he's needing to go to the doctor, which he didn't ever really do. He never wanted to go because he was always healthy. He ate well, he exercised. And so he went to the doctor, and they gave him some muscle relaxers. And for about 2 weeks, it just was getting worse and worse, to the point that he always went to work, but he's like, I don't think I can go this week. I said, okay. And so on June 1st, I finally was still thinking about the substitute teaching or becoming a teacher. And so I decided I would apply. I prayed about it, and I felt really strongly you should apply. And then the next day, on June 2nd, my husband woke up and his legs were swelling, and he knew that wasn't normal. So he said, I think we need to go to Instacare. So we went to Instacare, and the doctor said, let's x-ray your shoulder. So I don't see anything, but you know what? It could be your gallbladder. So we said, okay. So I want to send you for an ultrasound. So we left, and we went to another location, and we had an ultrasound. And after the ultrasound, they had us talk to the Instacare doctor who they called, and we had him on the line, and they said, we think we see something there. It's not your gallbladder, but we need to do a CT scan. And so he said, okay. So they did a CT scan, and this has been going on all day, right? He doesn't feel well. Our kids are at school at the time. I think it's about 2:00 in the afternoon. And so when we're done with the CT scan, we walk into the room, and they said, okay, your main doctor is waiting for you to come right now and talk to them. And he said, well, can we do this tomorrow? We're tired. I've been here all day. I don't feel well. And she said, no. She says, we think you have renal cell carcinoma.
Jeez.
And when I heard that, I was pretty sure it was cancer, but I had to look it up. And that's kidney cancer. And I turned to him and I says, is that kidney cancer? And he knew exactly because he was a nurse. And he said, yes. And so then we sat in the parking lot for a minute and just sort of cried and were in shock. And then we headed up to the doctor's office.
Wow.
So
why was it in his shoulder?
Yeah.
In his shoulder, we found out is because it was a referred pain from his kidney, that there are nerves that run by the kidney.
Really?
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about this type of cancer. Like what's usually treatment and, cure rates and that kind of stuff. Like, did he tell you anything like that?
So they didn't know right off. So what they said was, okay, we're going to send you to the hospital. And we were there for 4 days. My dad happened to pick my kids up from school, and my mom was in Disneyland with my brother. And I said, can you take them home with you tonight? They said, Nate, they think Nate has cancer. And so my dad took them. We didn't tell the kids anything. And they started running test after test. And so they did an MRI, and they saw that he had a tumor on his right kidney the size of a volleyball. And then, yeah, it was big. And then they said, and we did a CT scan, and we see some spots in your lungs. So they diagnosed him. They had to do the biopsy still, but they diagnosed him with a stage 4 cancer because it had spread somewhere. So they kind of were trying to figure it out and did some different testing. It just doesn't look like it could be a sarcoma instead of a carcinoma. We're not sure, what this is exactly. And so it took a while, but the biopsy came back and said that he had a stage 4 Wilms tumor, which is a childhood kidney cancer. And I think something like no more than, I think I read it was 200 to 300 adults have ever had that.
Wow.
So the thing about it, though, is it was good news because it's very curable. They have 5 stages of Wilms tumor cancer because you have 2 kidneys. And so there's 5 stages. So we had a lot of hopeful, this is probably going to be just fine kind of talks with doctors. I especially never felt like it wasn't going to work out at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Right. So you're going through this diagnosis. Your kids are how old?
My son is 11. He's in 6th grade. And my daughter is in 9th grade.
Wow. So old enough to know that something's going on. How did that conversation with them go once you guys found out?
So that was hard. So we have them come to the hospital, and Nate says, Dad's not been feeling well, as you know, and they've run some tests, and it looks like it's cancer. And my daughter, who was the 9th grader, Katie, she just started crying, and my son just followed. And they didn't know what to think. They just knew the word cancer was scary, right?
Right.
So it was really hard.
Did you guys have like a family plan or anything like that? Like, did you? I mean, as far as like, okay, like these are the treatments we're going to do, and this is who you're going to stay with, or like, did you let the kids come during treatments, or I don't even know. I don't think they would be allowed, right?
Well, no. So what we did is we had my parents were there. Their other grandparents were on a mission, but my parents, interestingly enough, as well. And I find all these things that happened throughout were miracles. My parents had just retired. My dad retired that March before we found out. And my mom retired in June. She was going to be done 2 weeks after we found out. So they really stayed. They had my kids when we needed them. But he came home in 4 days, and then we waited a couple of weeks, and then he had surgery. And so the surgery was very much a miracle. They had said that they thought that it would be in his liver as well when they looked at it. And so they had a liver specialist that would be there. And when they went in, it was not in the liver. And they were able to remove 95% of the tumor. It had gone into his inferior vena cava, which is a large blood vessel that runs to your heart. So they had to take that out and replace it. And they took out the gallbladder. But the fact that he actually survived the surgery, I think, was the first miracle, actually.
Wow. So the surgery was specifically to remove the tumor, right? And then did he go through chemo and radiation and stuff too, or?
He did. He started chemo. This was in June. At the end of June, he had his surgery. He got out on the 1st of July. And he started chemo kind of immediately, which is really hard because you figure he had this huge surgery. He was stapled all the way up, and you have to go right into chemo. So you're not even recovered, basically.
Right.
And he did. And so the doctor said, okay, I'm going to have to call Primary Children's Hospital, which is where he used to work, or he was working at the time, actually, as well. And he said, we'll get their regimen because I've never seen this on an adult. And so he did that. And in October, the end of October of that year, we had our first scan. And scans are really scary because you don't know what's going to happen. Is it going to be good or bad? And it showed that it hadn't worked. The tumors were getting larger. So at this point, that was very sad and discouraging and kind of scary. But the doctor said, you know what, I'm going to put you on I think it was a melanoma drug. We're going to take you off the chemo for a while and try to figure out what to do. So they put him on some kind of melanoma drug, which did help some, and it was shrinking things a little bit. And then they said, we're going to send you to Texas. Trying to think of the name of the hospital, but it's famous. Anyway, they sent him to Texas to see what they could do. And they says, we'll put you on an immunotherapy drug. So they put him on that. I think it was in December that he went. And he came back in January and they started that. And that's what we did for a little bit.
Wow. How long had this been from the time of diagnosis to this point?
So diagnosis was June 2nd, 2016, and we were in January of 2017.
Wow. Okay.
And so in January, he seemed to be getting kind of worse. But I just thought, oh, it's just the drug really killing everything. And they've got him on this drug and it's kind of intense. Mm-hmm. And then in February, he went to the hospital a couple of times with some bleeding and problems in his lungs. And by the 1st of March, he was coming home with oxygen. And he was supposed to have his scan at the end of March, on March 24th, I believe. And I thought, okay, we just have to get to the scan. I was seeing things, but in denial, kind of in shock. Mm-hmm. Oh, no, we just have to get to the scan. It's probably working. And then when he was supposed to go to the scan on March 24th, he said, I'm not going to the scan. And I said, why not? I says, I want to go on hospice. I know I'm not going to make it. I'm a nurse. I already know I'm not going to make it. So he went on to hospice, and my kids, in fact, had gone to Disneyland with their parents, so they weren't there with us when that happened.
Oh, I can't. Okay, let me get my thoughts here for a second. As a wife, okay, how did you take that? Like, I feel like I would have been angry, like I would have been like, no, you don't get to give up. Like, that's how I would have viewed it, right? Not that that's what it was, but I think I would have been angry at that point. But how did you handle that?
I was really upset. I also was like, you can't leave me here to raise these kids by myself. Yeah. Not that he had a choice, but grief isn't logical that way, right?
No, it's not. Right.
It's just how it is. So I went to my parents actually that night. His mom was with him, and my dad's birthday was the next day, and my son's, and I said, I'm going to go over and spend the night so I can pray and, think about this. And I felt better the next day. I felt peaceful. It was hard, but I knew it would be okay. And my son's birthday was on the 25th, and he called him when he was in Disneyland and on his trip and told him that he wasn't going to make it on his birthday. And he was turned 12.
Oh my gosh. Oh.
So did you notice like was he starting to deteriorate that like faster at that point? Like, did you get anything from the doctor saying like approximately how much time he had left?
I never got it. He would go sometimes with someone else to the doctor because I had to work full time. And so I don't know if they ever told him, but I was never told. The doctors were always optimistic. Like, I think the survival rate, 5-year survival rate is something like 85% for that. Mm-hmm. Wow. So we just thought, the whole time I never remember them saying, but they may have been telling him things and he didn't want. He was trying to protect me. Yeah. So then on the 28th of March, I happened to have spring break, which was nice that week. So I was home with him. And on the 28th of March, he slipped into a coma. And at night, he had his nurse friend, someone he knew, that came to stay with him so we could have a break. And I went to sleep and they woke me up and said that he had passed. And
Wow.
so it
Oh my
was
gosh.
almost 10 months, but not quite.
And how long from the time that he said that he was just going to go on hospice?
Hospice was only for 4 days.
That fast.
Yes.
Oh, Meredith.
Wow.
So you guys really didn't have, I mean, it was just, you had no time to prepare for that at all. Like really, I mean, right? Because you had been hopeful that things were going to work out, and your kids, of course, were at Disney. Were they able to make it back before his passing or no?
They weren't. And I think that was really hard because they couldn't. He called and had a really long conversation with them and told them things. And he was trying to make it until they got home. But when I look back now, I think that was a tender mercy from the Lord, because I don't think that watching that would have been good for them. They already had trauma from it, especially my daughter. And if she would have had to see that happen, I think it would be worse.
Right. Oh my
Wow.
gosh. How did you how did you move forward from that?
So I kind of got in a mode where it was just, people that haven't, I think we've all had grief, but you think that you know how it might go. Oh, she's going to go through this. And there is kind of the stages of grief. Those stages were actually made for people that were terminally ill, I found out, not for people that are actually going
Really?
through grief. Yeah, but they do apply. I think.
Wow.
But I
Yeah.
found out that was more for that, because I do think I went through all the stages. But I kind of got in this like mechanical mode, just sort of in shock, numb, going through the motions. Okay, I still have to go to work. I was going to work. I had started going to work in August, and then I had to go to school 2 nights a week, and I was going to school full time the whole time this was happening. So I had to finish up my semester. They said, you don't have to finish, you only have a month left, but we can, you can finish it another time. And I said, no, because I knew I'd have to finish it later. And I just needed it to be done. So I had school. I think I had school that summer as well, a little bit of school, not much. And then, so I just had to pick up and keep going. So I went to school in the fall, and I finished that December. And, kids went back to school. My mom and dad helped me a lot. And I just had to keep going, I guess.
How was your testimony during this time, through the whole process?
I have to say, when this was happening, I mean, there was a part of me before he passed away that was angry with God, and that came back later. But there's something about losing someone. I also have a really strong testimony of this now, that it is the saddest thing that will happen. But, he passed at my house, and I could feel the presence of angels for weeks before that happened. They were in our home. You could tell that he knew that they were there. He didn't say much about it, but I could tell. And as I'd lie down at night, right before he passed and after he passed, I'd close my eyes, and I would see like the faces of my grandmothers and great grandmothers who I'd never met, but just had seen pictures of, that were with me the whole time.
Oh my gosh.
And so you can't deny the power, I feel like, of a Father in heaven and a Savior who loves you when you have that presence in your home and feel that.
Yeah. So you mentioned, for a while there you were angry at God, and then you were angry at him again.
Yes.
How did
first
that work
year,
out?
yeah. So the first year I kind of was going through the motions still, and still kind of in shock. And my family thought, wow, she's doing great. And I thought I was doing kind of great. But then when we hit about a year, and I was very depressed, of course, through this all, but I was just going along. When we hit a year, I realized, this was it. Like, he wasn't coming back, kind of, it came out of the shock. And I suffer from depression and anxiety anyway. And I would go to bed at night, and I would think, I hope that I don't wake up tomorrow. I hope that I wasn't going to any plan to do anything to harm myself, but I was hoping that I would not have to wake up to this again.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got some help with that. But then that next year, sometimes people think the first year is the hardest, but the second year is the worst, I would say. And I've heard that from lots of people that have gone through it, because now it's real. So I started getting pretty angry. I mean, I was going to church. I was, reading my scriptures, I was praying, but I was kind of mad, right? And that summer, right after it had been a year, I went to the temple one day, and I was sitting in initiatory, and I sat next to some ladies, and I said, "Oh, how's your day?" And they said, "Oh, good." And I said something, and they told me that they go every single day to the temple. And I thought, a couple of weeks away from school ending, could I do that? So that summer, I went every day to the temple before my kids woke up.
Wow.
And that's where I felt the atonement healing me, is through that experience, I think. So as I went along, I got more used to it. I was still overwhelmed, but I kind of got out of the angry part, because I came to a point where and I don't know if you've heard this before, you've probably heard this quote, but where they said, you can either get better, you can either be bitter or get better.
Right.
So I had to make a choice. Am I going to be bitter about everything that's happened, or am I going to get better? And I decided I was going to get better.
Wow. Oh my goodness. You're saying things, and it's just bringing up, my own processes and everything like that with grief. And, after losing my brother, I went ahead and I started training to be a grief facilitator in our town. And so what you're saying is so, reminiscent of the many people that I've had come through grief, like to grief groups and stuff like that. The fact that we really do, we have that choice at some point to either hold on to that bitterness or to fight to get better, Did you feel like it was possible, or was it more just like I can't be bitter. I have to try, even though it doesn't feel like it's possible. Did you have hope and kind of surety, or?
I did have hope later. I will say when it first happened, there was probably that second year, a lot of, am I going to be able to do this? I mean, before it happened as well with my husband, I was talking and I said, I can't do this by myself. I'm not strong enough of a person. I don't think I can do this. You find out how strong you really are by going through that, I think. So I did learn that.
Yeah. Wow.
So you said the second year was the hardest. Is that because, like you said, the first year you're kind of like almost robotic, just going through the motions? Is it because it started to hit you of the reality of you doing all of this alone?
Yes. And how much you missed the person, right? How much you missed having them there with you, Nate was a full of life person. He was charismatic. He's funny. He was always into having fun. He loved that. We used to have parties with the neighbors, and we'd always invite people over. He gardened a lot. He rock climbed. He just lived life to the fullest. I don't know if you know the song by, I think it's Tim McGraw, Live Like You Were Dying.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how he lived before he ever knew he was sick, right? So, everyone missed him. He had lots of friends and lots of family. So yeah.
How did he take this happening to his life? Like, did he get it? Was he super depressed about it? Did he still try to look for the silver lining? Like, how did he go through it?
He was very mechanical at the beginning, because he was a nurse, and he would sit and talk to them and just listen to the facts, like everything was okay. He became an anxious person, which he never had been. He was always the one that needed to help me be calm. going through it, but he did he was a good patient, let's say, very nice and kind. He's always very service oriented anyway. And he was funny though, I'll tell you, because he did have that nursing background. When he went to the ICU, I thought he was with it. I didn't realize that he had a lot of pain medication and he was kind of out of it, because he would sit and say things with his eyes closed about what they need to do with the IV and all these different things. And then I finally realized that, and then I would walk past him and he'd open his eyes and go, hi. And then I'd walk back to sit in my chair and say hi to him. And then if I came back again, he'd say it again. So he really didn't know what was going on, but he would sit and tell the nurses things while he was in the hospital and things like that. Sometimes he would fix things if they were making noises and stuff.
Oh, that's funny.
Turn off the alarms.
Yeah,
right.
He would. Yep.
Oh,
Funny.
wow. Well, as a mom, how were you able to juggle your own grief and your kids and help them out? Because obviously there's so many different people that are grieving, right? You know, it's not just you get to shut the whole world off and grieve alone and, you know, do your own thing. So how was that process for you?
Well, it was hard. My kids had therapy and we would just kind of survive. That's the only word I can use. We would survive. We would, okay, let's maybe go get dinner. Let's eat something we have here. Let's just sit and watch TV and get through the next day or do whatever we can. It's very much a survival mode. I have people on a Facebook group that's for LDS widows and widowers, and they talk about it too. I feel so bad about myself. You know, we had cereal for dinner tonight. It's survival. So I did my best to help them, but I have to say, I wish I could have done more, because I was grieving and I was just trying to work and go to school and survive. That's the only word I have for it. Survive.
Right.
My kids would think it was awesome if they could eat cereal every day.
I know. Yeah,
I know.
kids would be all over that. Yeah. Oh. Did you find that any of your relationships changed with people after he passed? Or did they stay pretty much the same or get stronger? Or?
I would say, besides obviously losing the person, there is a sense of loss in all parts of your life. Because he had these friends that we were mutual friends with, and they were kind of around for a year and sort of fizzled out, didn't see anymore. And there's just a sense of loss. I don't know how to say it. And things did change with relationships with me as well, because when I was going through my angry phase, I was having a hard time with a lot of people that I felt maybe it was hard with his family for me for a while. I think just because anytime I was with them, it reminded me of him. And that was painful at first. That was really painful. But they were always there to support me. They did great. But I was the one that was kind of, struggling. I became more isolated. I would always been a pretty social person. And even now I would say it's never been the same. I hope it will get back though. I'm trying to work on it.
No, I get emotional because I was on that flip side of like being the family, and so it's for me, like, I really appreciate your openness and everything, because you kind of can offer a perspective that I haven't been able to get yet, can I ask, let's see, how do I phrase this? Did you still feel like they were your family? Like your husband's side of the family? Or did you feel like there was a disconnect?
Oh, I still felt like they were family, and that was comforting. But yes, there's something that happens when you lose your spouse where you feel like, now what do I do? All of a sudden, I'm not married anymore. In your mind, it's the most frightening thing. I don't know how to describe it, but I was just terrified. And where do I belong at church? Where do I belong in the world? I've been a wife and a mother, and I love being those things. So who am I now? And so there's something that happens where you just sort of feel, it's hard to describe. It's gotten much better, but it's just that your whole life has gone upside down. And grief doesn't,
Mm-hmm.
another thing is, if you haven't been through a lot of grief, you might not understand that, a year, people sometimes are thinking, okay, it's been a year, she should be good, or kids should be fine. This goes on for a long time. And I had a friend from high school, and as soon as his wife, who I'd known as well, passed in her 20s from cancer, and he just sent me a message on Facebook and said, I know about this group. And that group was awesome, and still is awesome. It's just so nice to hear someone talk and you think, I get what you're saying. And they have conferences every year. So that's just, it's great. It really helps.
Wow.
And it's
That's
for
nice to know.
for widows
Widows and
LDS,
widowers.
and widowers.
right? It's
Okay.
LDS.
Widows and widowers. Yes. And then they just ask you some questions to see, your spouse passed away, maybe when, to make sure you're not a scammer or something. But yeah, it's great. I've been to the conference before, so.
Wow.
How do you
That's
think
fantastic
that group has helped you?
The conference gave me hope. I sat with we learned about different things. We had some good keynote speakers that have written books, and they're, LDS, of course, authors. But I think they gave me hope, because I would sit with other widows or widowers, and they would say, oh, it's been 5 years. And they seemed to have gone forward. So
gotcha.
I think it was maybe my first or second, maybe it was my second year in. And I thought, I will survive this, I think.
Yeah.
So.
Do they do a pretty, well, I don't want to say good job, because that's not the right way to say it, but like, how does the gospel tie into that group? I mean, is there a lot of open conversation about gospel related topics and how to stay strong in your testimony? Or is it more just kind of the camaraderie of like, hey, we're all part of this super, painful club?
Yeah. There's a lot of good things. There's a lot of gospel topics and discussions. And there are people that in different phases of grief, and I can look at some of their things and I can see, okay, I'm angry. I'm so mad right now. And I think, I get that, but I'm not there anymore. I want to say, and I will, when I can, comment, it won't be forever. You'll feel better one day. You really will. And you'll be able to smile and think about the person and not cry. Right.
I think that was one of the hardest things that I experienced just going through my own grief and stuff is I felt like I didn't know where to turn in order to have access to a lot of the gospel in the grief process. Like we always hear of like, well, just keep praying again. And those are right answers, right? Like go to the temple, pray, serve in your callings, just keep the commandments, right? Like keep doing what you're going to be doing. And especially, I think the most important thing is just like, make sure you keep that communication open with your Heavenly Father, yell at him, scream at him if you have to, but talk to him. Don't shut down. Cause the moment that you shut down, Satan has a huge opening, he really, really does. And so I think for me, it was really frustrating because I kept looking for something, to fix it, right? To fix the grief. And I wanted it to be a gospel fix. I was like thinking like the church has, addiction meetings and it's got all of the, I remember I was angry at everything. Right. And so I just directed my anger towards everyone who wasn't there to fix what I needed fixed. Right. But have you, you're how far out, how long ago was that this happened?
This will be 6 years at the end of this month.
Okay. So you definitely have had time to kind of go through a lot of the process of it. Looking back, have you been able to see where there are resources, or where there was a sense of having more peace or finding more strength that are gospel related?
Resources, I would just say, for me, a lot of my resources were with my ward, the people in my community, my ward that were there for me for everything. I was in the best ward ever. and they helped me through everything. They were always doing things. I would find things my first year too. People would leave things on my porch for Easter for the kids and for me, or Mother's Day. People were helping come and do things like clean out my rain gutters, my, ministering brothers, without being asked. And it was amazing. And it was hard to take, all that service too, because I was pretty private. Even when my husband was sick, I didn't want to ask for help for anything. So it was a good lesson to learn that, getting help is okay. And it's good for everyone, I guess.
Oh, I love that.
You talked about how the atonement helped you through this. Can you talk more about that?
Yes. So I didn't mention this earlier, but I'll go ahead. In February of 2016, before we found out, I was at the temple and I had this experience where I was just sitting in the celestial room, and I had this huge spiritual experience where I was told that I'd been chosen in the furnace of affliction, and that Heavenly Father, that Heavenly Father loved me, but that He had the power to heal, and He was going to heal me.
Wow.
And I remembered that the whole time I went through it. And as I look at my life now, He did. He healed me. And I thought I would not have gotten through this without my Savior. And so I'm glad that I didn't get too angry and left what I was doing, but I don't know how people do it without it. I don't.
Yeah, I don't know either. I really don't. Were you able to kind of pass that on to your kids? Like, how did you help them? Because, I mean, the atonement is so hard to understand, right? Like, it's to grasp it sometimes, and it's even harder sometimes to understand how to use it. So how did you, have those conversations with your kids? How'd you help them to feel that?
I tried to talk to them about experiences. I talked to them a lot about the experiences I was having going to the temple, and how that really helped me, and how I felt the Spirit with me, and how I helped feel guided. I was guided.
Wow. And how are they doing today?
They're doing a lot better. My son has done really well. My daughter's had some mental health struggles, so she's still working through it, but it's gotten better than it was, I'd say. Yeah.
I was just going to say, so I was just wondering how the story continued after the second year.
Okay. All right. So I decided that I'd start trying to do some dating. I just felt so out of sorts. I'm not the same person I used to be. I'm not a wife now. So it was horrible. I'm just going to say. I was like, you think it's bad? It's bad in my 40s. Like, oh my gosh. Anyway, so I did a little bit of online dating, and I met a couple of nicer people, but it was rough. And so in September of 2019, let me go back. So in January of 2019, I was working with someone. She worked for my school district and would come and check on my compliance, it's called, with your IEPs, to make sure you've got everything ducks in a row. And she says, I have this friend that I want to set you up with, but he's getting divorced, but it's not finalized yet, but I really think you guys might like each other. And I thought, okay, I don't know if I want to do this. And so anyway, so that just kind of, nothing really happened with it. And she kind of mentioned it, I think when I came back in August of September 2019, and she said, I want to set you guys up. So let's look at it. I said, okay, I'll go, that's fine. It was kind of a lot of pressure because I thought, well, what if I don't like him? She's, I have to see her all the time and she's really excited, whatever.
Yeah.
So anyway, so then she came back and she said, you know, I talked to him and he said he's not ready to date right now. It's just he got out of this divorce, you know, out of this relationship and marriage, and he's not ready. I was like, kind of like, oh. And so then she comes back a few weeks later in September and says, you know what, he's changed his mind and he wants to go. Let's just go on a double date together. We'll go out to lunch. We'll just do that, you know, just for an hour or whatever. And I said, okay. So I remember on my way driving there, I thought, I do not want to do this. And I'm a little nervous. And I've gone on some other dates, right? But this is like with someone I don't know, and I'm worried about her, you know. So I was called and said I'm not going to be there. But then I was like, you just have to just go. It's going to be like an hour. So I went and I met her friend whose name was Matt, and kind of were getting along. I thought he was pretty nice. And so we had lunch, and then she said, do you want to come to our house and play games? And I thought, sure, why not? So we went, and I kind of liked him, but I was still a little nervous. And so when I was walking out, he walked out with me, and he asked me for my number. And I was like, okay, yeah, sure. And I didn't hear from him for a couple of days. So I thought, you know, I don't know if he likes me or not, and it really doesn't matter, you know, kind of thing. And then he called me, and we went out that next Saturday. I think we'd gone out on a Friday or something. And so we went out on a Saturday, and then we started dating. And we got engaged that January of 2020, and we were married this month. It'll be 3 years. So March 20th, 2020, right before they shut everything down. We had to have a quick little not 10 people wedding because they were down for COVID. So, and he has, I have 2 bonus daughters from his prior marriage. So Vivia is 18, and my son Cameron is going to be 18 this month. They're seniors. And then Violet's in 9th grade. And the kids get along. I mean, they have their moments, but they get along really well. And it's kind of all gone together. So I just feel like, you know, it doesn't happen for everyone that goes through what I've gone through. You don't find someone else and have it work out well. But I do feel like, you know, Heavenly Father, I felt like he took so much from me. And then it's come full circle, and I can't really imagine my life without them in it.
Wow.
Wow. It's
makes me
cool
so
to
happy
see
for
how,
you.
yeah, it's cool to see how God's plans work out when we don't know how they're going to, right?
Yeah.
Right. And it doesn't mean that one option is better than the other. Just that Heavenly Father can always find a way to bless us, right? He can always find a way to help us to find joy in our life and to feel loved, and, you know, to still experience that sense of feeling whole, you know, when we've gone so long, right? Feeling empty. So I think that's awesome. That's such a beautiful story.
Thank you.
So moving forward, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say some of the things that I worried about, right, were how am I going? I did have a good amount of life insurance that my husband got when he was 29. He just felt like he should get it. And so that was awesome. So I had some help, and you get death benefits from Social Security and those kinds of things. But I thought, how am I going to go on after my kids get old enough, and that goes away, right? The death benefits. And I was so worried about my kids not having a dad and my son not having someone. And my husband now has been so good for my kids, and he's taken the role of doing all the fun boy things with my son, motorcycling and teaching him how to fix cars and everything. And so the Lord made a way for, you know, he made that work as well. So anyway.
That's cool.
That's really neat. So do you feel like a part of the, I guess, I don't want to call it silver lining or purpose, but do you feel like you have a purpose that's bigger than the loss that you've gone through now, and that this loss kind of helped you to know how to help other people?
Yes, I've always, with kind of the background that I have, I went into social work and those kinds of things and teaching, because I've always known my mission in life was to help people. I've had a lot of experiences where I've helped, friends and other people around me, and just in jobs and other ways. So I decided that, that was something I was going to do. And that's part of why I want to do this podcast as well, is if this helps one person. This is my story, but I'm doing this with my Father in heaven. And I've asked him before he came on, how can I help somebody? And I've had
Yeah.
I've had a couple people in my life that I know that have ended up, after this happened, having spouses that had cancer. And I've, kind of kept in touch and tried to help them. And I'm always wanting to help who I can. So, if there's anyone that wants to ever get a hold of me that wants to talk, that would be awesome. I'd be up for that.
Oh,
Awesome. That's
wonderful.
nice of you.
What's the best way for people to get a hold of you if they're interested? Would you like them to kind of contact us and have us play middleman, or something that they can find you at?
Yeah, they could find me there, or they could email me and I could get a hold of them. If you have an email, maybe that way.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we'll do that. Well, let me ask, do you have any final, thoughts or any, messages that you really wanted to leave with our audience today?
Well, I had one quote that I wanted to read, but I'll have to look down for that, guys.
No, you're good.
No worries.
That I really, really touched me right after my husband passed, and it still does today. It's from, sorry guys, you can hear my.
You're
No,
good.
you're fine.
From, I believe it's from Joseph B. Worthland. Each of us will have our own Fridays, those days when the universe itself seems shattered and shards of our world are littered about us in pieces. We all will experience those broken times when it seems we can never be put together again. We all have our Fridays. But I testify to you, in the name of the one who conquered death, Sunday will come. In the darkness of our sorrow, Sunday will come. No matter our desperation, no matter our grief, in this life or the next, Sunday will come.
That's beautiful.
Awesome.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Got me crying here. Oh, wow. You are such an inspiration. I mean, I know that it's been 6 years. And so, of course, telling your story, it doesn't feel as raw and as painful as what it did at one point, right?
Yes.
Like it got a little bit easier for you to be carrying that grief. And I remember seeing a thing once where it was like this ball, and it was supposed to represent grief. And what a lot of people think happens with that is that, this ball is huge and it's inside your little jar that you can contain all your emotions in, and it takes up all the space. And then eventually, the ball gets smaller and smaller. But in actuality, the ball doesn't shrink at all. Our jar just gets bigger, right? We're just able to handle it a little bit better. And I think that you are handling yours beautifully. I love that you have this desire to help other people who have gone through the things that you've had to go through, and that you're willing to, even when you're getting mad at your Heavenly Father, right? Not just once, but twice, there's going to be days probably where you get mad at him again, because that's what we do. But I love that you're willing to keep going, and that you really wanted to make sure that you did not have to remain in your bitterness, and that you really could become even better from this. We had Ashley Stone on, and she said something a couple times during her podcast that just stuck with me. And I say it all the time, is just, God will work all things together for our good. He really, really will. And it doesn't mean that, he's trying to punish us because something bad happens. It just means that, something bad happened. It's a part of life, and it's hard and it's ugly, and it's definitely not something that we want to happen, but the opportunity to grow and to become more like our Savior is always there through those moments. And it's our choice whether we want to grasp onto that growth and we want to move forward with him, or if we want to stay stuck, And I love that you're setting the example to really grow with your Savior and to move forward. And, I really appreciate you coming on here today and sharing your story with us.
Thank you. It was really fun. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah. And I love that quote that Sundays will come. And I love that you're willing to help people find their Sundays. Yeah. That's really cool. Absolutely. That you're willing to do that. Go out of your comfort zone and help people to do that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So thanks for having the courage to come on the show and to put yourself out there to help people. That's really cool that you do that.
Yeah, that's so amazing. Yeah. All right. Well, to our listeners, guys, thanks again for tuning in. We really, really appreciate you guys. We appreciate you sharing episodes like Meredith's. We ask that you be sure that you drop a comment for her and just, let her know what part of the episode was your favorite. And then do your little 5-second missionary work and share this episode of Latter-day Lights so that other people might be able to grow a little bit more in their own testimonies and maybe find a little bit of hope through the situations that they're going through. And if you guys have a story that you'd like to share as well, be sure to head over to latterdaylights.com. At the very bottom of the page there's a contact form. It's pretty simple. You just fill that out and we'll get in touch with you. And then you too can be a light for others.
Yeah. Awesome. And Meredith, we'll put those links in the comments for those listeners that are looking for somewhere to go to find grief, counseling, or comfort. Definitely, there's resources out there. So we'll put those in there to help you. So thanks again, Meredith, for being on the show.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And thanks everyone for watching. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Alicia.
Next time. I know we're all just wanting to say things. Sorry. No, we really do.
I don't want to stop you from talking, Alicia. I know you love to do that. So.
I know. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We will see you next week.
Okay. Take care.